I think a lot of parents do that kind of thing. We appease, we minimize, we try to deflect, trying to put out that metaphorical fire of the child's pushback, right? It's our discomfort with their discomfort. But the danger is that the child might interpret that kind of reaction and internalize it with something like, my feelings must not matter. Something must be wrong with me, right? That can leave them feeling unseen, unheard, and even really alone in their emotional struggle. Welcome to the Blended Family Breakthrough Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Kim.
We believe in a world where blended families can experience a future full of hope, connection, and peace.
That's why we offer tools, strategies, and guidance that move you from a place of confusion and conflict to experiencing a life of confidence and connection.
We're so glad you're joining us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations as we cover everything from romance to parenting and yes, even dealing with that difficult ex.
So if you're ready to experience breakthrough in your blended family, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Well, hey there. Welcome and thanks so much for being here. I was thinking before we hit record about how many podcasts I personally listen to. And often the information is great, but I don't talk to anyone about it or actually do anything with what I discovered. I just kind of think, wow, that was great. And then I move on. And I've found what tends to help most is when I have someone to talk to about what I'm learning. Now, if you resonate with that at all, here's a really simple action that you can take. Share an episode with a friend, a coworker, or a family member who might also be in a blended family. And then take them to coffee or invite them to go on a walk or something so that you can talk about what you're both learning. Now, you can be accountability buddies. You can encourage each other along the way and just kind of do life together. So before we get started, think about who that might be for you and maybe even pause right now and send them this episode.
Ooh, yeah. I love that idea.
Yeah. Be intentional about your
we
learning.
need each other.
For sure. All right, let's hop in. Almost every couple in the throes of blending a family eventually hits that pivotal moment when a child says or does something hurtful, right? You're like, duh, Mike. For the bio parent, it's that moment of realizing your child is struggling with the idea of blending. They might come to you with a lot of questions or worries or complaints. Or resistance might show up in more overt ways, like making accusations, withdrawing, or even lashing out. Now, for a step parent, this is often that moment that you realize your partner's child isn't okay with the blending of your family, and it can feel deeply personal to you, like they're rejecting you. Sometimes it's subtle, like just being ignored when you walk into the room. Other times it's more obvious, like a child refusing to join a family activity once they find out you're going to be there.
Yeah, that can hurt. Kids can respond in all sorts of ways. Some will use words, while others act out with attitudes or behaviors that often seem completely out of character for them. Some might shut down, use sarcasm, or slide into passive-aggressive behaviors. Whatever form it takes, when a child says or does something hurtful in response to blending, these pushback predicaments often leaves the adults wondering, how on earth should we respond to this, right?
That's right. And that's what we want to unpack in this two-part series. Our goal is to help you understand where these challenging reactions might be coming from and how you can respond in a way that not only addresses the behavior, but also supports your child's emotional needs when they're pushing back and resistant to blending. So today we're going to outline a few pushback predicaments. And we're going to share some real-life examples from couples that we've coached to bring some of these challenging situations to life.
The first pushback predicament that's quite common is competing for love. Here's what that can sound like. You love Joe more than you love me. Or, is Joe more important to you than me? Or even, you spend more time with Joe's kids than you do with me. Now, this happens when a child believes that love is limited, that there's only so much to go around. At the core of the pushback is fear. Fear that they'll lose their share of your love and attention if someone else seems to be getting it.
Mm-hmm. Another pushback predicament is accusations and threats. Kids might say things like, "You don't listen to me or care about what's best for me anymore." Or, "If you marry her, I'm not moving into her house with you." Or, "If it wasn't for your beliefs, you and mom would still be together." This often comes from kids still wrestling with why their parents can't be together anymore, or from a place of confusion, insecurity, or even fear.
Mm-hmm. A third pushback predicament is an oppositional attitude. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the child who gets easily agitated and acts out behaviorally, like throwing down their backpack and stomping out of the room when their step-parent is present. Or maybe they physically jump in to break up hand-holding between their parent and step-parent. Sometimes they'll tolerate being in the same space, but their body language tells the story. Mm-hmm. They turn their back to the step-parent, refuse to make eye contact or engage. They might respond with sarcasm to anything the step-parent says. And later, the child may complain about the step-parent to their parent or even someone else, often with harsh or exaggerated criticism. Some kids put up strong walls of resistance, saying things like, "I don't want him at my graduation party," or, "If they're going to the movies, I'm staying home." I even heard about a blended couple's wedding where the groom's teenage daughter agreed to attend, but she refused to appear in any pictures that included her new stepmom.
Yeah.
That's oppositional.
That's tough. Oppositional kids may also resort to manipulation, angry outbursts, guilt tripping, or even sabotage. But here's the important thing. At the root of all of these behaviors is usually one thing: loss. And that brings us to the fourth pushback predicament: loss and grief. This shows up in statements like, "I wish it was just us on this trip. I don't really want them here." Or, "Remember how much fun Christmas used to be?" Or, "How come you don't read to me anymore and hang out before bed? That changed after Jane moved in." These words are painful to hear sometimes, but they're really a child's way of expressing loss and grief as they process the changes in the blending family.
You've probably heard us say this before, but it's such an important truth to keep in mind. Step families are born out of loss and into ambiguity. However your kids are reacting to your blend, it's almost always coming from a place of deep loss. That loss might stem from divorce, death, or abandonment. Your children are grieving something they no longer have, their first family identity, possibly a biological parent. They're grieving what was, or even what could have been. Our kids experience many different kinds of loss, and they need our support as they work through their grief.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Kim just said, step families are born out of loss and also into ambiguity, or another word for that is uncertainty. At the root of most challenging words and behaviors that you'll see from kids is fear. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, and fear of even more loss. While you might see your new partner and the blending of the families as the start of a beautiful new chapter, your kids are probably looking through a very different lens, one that's clouded by grief and fear.
So the real question becomes, how will you respond when your child is struggling? When you see them competing for love, making accusations or threats, being oppositional or expressing loss and grief, or maybe even all of these at once, what's the best way to move forward? That's what we want to help you navigate.
Absolutely. Honey, you've faced pushback predicaments with Annika over the years for sure. And I think it might be helpful to share how you or other bioparents might tend to respond in those challenging moments, right?
Absolutely.
Like kind of what's that natural response?
Right. Well, my natural response in the past, at least, was to try and disarm her by easing her discomfort.
That is really a common reaction. When a parent sees their child struggling, it feels almost like that child is, we'll just say, on fire. Like you panic or do whatever it takes to put that fire out just to make everything okay again.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, it's not about wanting to make things okay for our child completely. It's also about making ourselves feel okay. When Annika pushed back, I felt sad for her and guilty about our circumstances, and even fearful that my decisions were ruining her childhood. So I would do whatever I could to put out the fire of her discomfort and my own by appeasing her, minimizing her feelings, or deflecting the situation by distracting her, rather than dealing directly with her emotional pain.
Yeah. So give us an example of what that might have looked like or sounded like.
Okay, sure. You know, when things didn't go Annika's way, her pushback might sound like, "You never made me pick up my stuff before Mike got here," right? My own discomfort would kick in, and instead of holding the boundary, I'd either pick up Annika's things for her or I'd give her a pass.
So that's appeasing, giving her the pass, right? And sometimes it shows up as making kind of that Hail Mary promise in the heat of the moment, right? For example, okay, we won't ever take another trip again until after you go off to college.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like this giant promise that you can't really keep, right?
Trying to put the fire out.
We've seen parents make unrealistic and extreme promises like this before during a pushback predicament in an attempt to just calm things down in the moment. But those promises often come back to haunt them later, creating tension and conflict within the blend and more pain for the child when a promise just can't get done or gets overlooked.
Right.
And what about minimizing and deflecting? What did that look like for you, honey?
Well, one big moment was the night before our wedding. Annika pulled me aside and said she didn't want me to marry you.
I'm sure that really caught you off guard.
Absolutely. Up to that point, she hadn't expressed any pushback about you or our marriage. Now, thankfully, we'd already learned a bit about how kids process remarriage and grief and loss, so I knew she was wrestling with some mixed emotions. I was able to stay calm, but my instinct was to go straight to a why question. Why don't you want me to marry Mike?
Yeah, which we know really isn't helpful.
No.
Most kids can't really answer that, right? They're just hurting, and often they don't have the words to explain why.
Exactly.
Honestly, that's hard for adults. Asking the why question is like, I don't know, I just feel that way.
Yeah, and when I asked her why, she couldn't answer me. She kind of, thought about it and tried to come up with something and finally said, he talks too softly on the answering machine, which I knew wasn't the real issue. But I didn't know what else to do in that moment, so I kind of froze a bit, and then I slipped into minimizing. "Oh, honey, that's not a big deal." And finally, I tried deflecting and distracting her by highlighting the positives. Tomorrow you'll get to wear a pretty dress and eat yummy cake, and we'll have so much fun together.
Yeah, don't worry about Mike. It's going to be fun wearing a dress and eating cake, right?
Yeah, don't worry about what you're feeling. Yeah.
I think a lot of parents do that kind of thing. We appease, we minimize, we try to deflect, trying to put out that metaphorical fire of the child's pushback, right? It's our discomfort with their discomfort. But the danger is that the child might interpret that kind of reaction and internalize it with something like, my feelings must not matter. Something must be wrong with me, right? That can leave them feeling unseen, unheard, and even really alone in their emotional struggle.
Yeah. Eventually I realized that my reactions weren't actually helping Annika work through her tough emotions. What she really needed was to be seen, heard, and emotionally supported, even when her pushback was uncomfortable for me. And right around that time, I picked up John Gottman's book, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, and it quickly became my favorite parenting resource.
Yeah, why is that one your favorite?
Well, because it helped me to understand the importance of parenting through the lens of emotional support. It taught me how to help kids identify, express, and manage painful emotions like loss, fear, and anger.
Right.
And that's what builds emotional resilience, which is so crucial as family dynamics shift in ways that kids never really wanted or asked for. There's bound to be pain, right?
Definitely, yeah. The kids have got a lot going on under the surface, just like we do. So this approach, what Gottman calls emotion coaching, definitely helped you to move away from appeasing, minimizing, and deflecting.
Absolutely, yeah. But let's point out a few other common ways parents and even step-parents might react when a child is competing for love, making accusations or threats, showing oppositional behavior, or expressing loss and grief. One big one is becoming defensive or placing blame.
Yeah.
That might sound like, well, I wasn't the problem. It's your mom's fault we're divorced. Or that's not true. Of course I listened to you.
Wow. And that kind of reaction can really tug on the loyalties, and it usually shuts a child down.
Yeah.
Right? It sends the message that their perspective is wrong or doesn't matter, and it certainly doesn't help them work through the pain and the confusion that's going on underneath.
Exactly. It also creates disconnection in the relationship. The child walks away thinking, my parent doesn't really want to understand where I'm at. They just don't get me.
Yeah.
So when parents respond with defensiveness or blame, it backfires, causing more pain and confusion for the child.
That's right. You know, another unhealthy response to pushback is sometimes trying to control the child's feelings and behavior. That might sound something like, well, that's ridiculous. You don't need to feel that way. You really should just be grateful. Or, you have to apologize to Jane for ignoring her. That was rude, and I expect you to treat her with love and respect. Or, we might even go into fix-it mode. You just need to spend more time with them so you can see how awesome they are.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound great?
The problem is when we tell a child to feel something other than what they're actually experiencing, or tell them what they should do to fix the problem, we discount their true emotions and we disregard the underlying issues. That leaves kids feeling misunderstood, confused, and emotionally unsupported.
That's right. And moving too quickly into correction or discipline not only shuts the child down, but it can also create long-term resentment, especially if the child feels responsible for their step-parent's emotions or believes the step-parent's feelings seem to be more important than theirs are.
Right. If a child is being rude or disrespectful, of course that needs to be addressed. But here's the key. Your child will be far more receptive to correction after they've been supported emotionally. Once they feel seen and heard, then you can address the behavior calmly without creating more anger or even resentment.
That's right. So let's sum all this up for a moment. Parents tend to respond to pushback in a few typical ways. Like you shared, honey, you leaned into appeasing, minimizing, and deflecting. Others may lean into blame, defensiveness, trying to fix it or control the situation.
And then there's another common one.
What's that?
Avoidance. Some parents just feel paralyzed in the moment. They don't know what to do, so they kind of stick their head in the sand, hoping things will just work themselves out.
That's right. But what we've seen time and time again is avoidance doesn't work. In fact, it usually makes things worse. Why? The child might escalate, raising the volume of their pushback, hoping someone will finally pay attention to them. And if they still don't get the emotional support they're craving, they'll either shut down and withdraw from the family altogether, or they'll try to take control themselves, claiming authority and power over the parent. It's interesting. We've seen that. We've kind of experienced that along the way,
have.
too. You know, a parent who backs down from doing any real parenting leaves a gap in the chain of healthy authority. And hurting kids often move in to fill that gap by kind of parenting themselves or trying to parent their parent.
Yeah. And anyone listening can probably imagine how unhealthy and damaging that is in a blended family. It just doesn't work. Avoidance doesn't solve problems, and it won't help your child work through their emotions. Again, it leaves them feeling lost, insecure, and alone in their pain.
That's right. So when pushback predicaments hit, we've explored quite a few of those things that don't help. Appeasing, minimizing, deflecting, defensiveness, blaming, trying to control or avoid. So the real question becomes, well, how can we approach these tough parenting moments in a way that actually helps?
And that brings us back to the parenting skill of emotion coaching, something we found incredibly effective in helping kids feel supported, seen, and heard. It guides them through tough emotions, equips them to manage difficult situations. It helps parents address inappropriate behavior in a healthy way, and ultimately builds a deeper connection with your child.
Exactly. And what you just said there at the end, that's the goal, right? Parents who practice this skill raise children who feel safe, supported, and understood. Studies show labeling emotions calms the nervous system, improves focus, boosts peer and academic success, and strengthens overall well-being. Like, that's a really good list, right?
Huge.
Most importantly, using an approach like this is going to deepen trust, connection, and respect between parent and child, which we all need more of in blended families where loss and ambiguity and pushback can be really common, right?
Exactly. If you're a regular listener, you've probably heard us talk about emotion coaching on the show before, or maybe this term is new to you and you're wondering what it actually takes to become a parent equipped with the skills needed to emotionally coach their child. And not just when they're pushing back on blended dynamics, but at other times too when they might be struggling, like when their team loses the big game, or they don't get invited to the party, or the family pet dies. This is a valuable skill that any parent can learn and utilize at any time that will make a positive difference in how you relate to your children and equip them for adulthood.
That's right. So whether you've heard us talk about emotion coaching before and you just want to reinforce what you learned and continue to grow in this skill, or you're ready to step into your child's emotional struggle and help them through it instead of resorting to the reactions that we discussed today, we want you to stay tuned because next week, instead of dropping one of our bi-weekly simple steps, we're going to take some time to walk you through John Gottman's steps of how to become an emotion coaching parent.
And we'll be giving you practical ways to apply these steps to each pushback predicament when your child is competing for love, making accusations or threats, showing opposition, or expressing loss and grief.
That's right. You do not want to miss next week. But until then, we want to challenge you to take a little bit of time to consider how you tend to react to pushback predicaments, simply for the sake of awareness.
Maybe you're like me and you tend to appease, minimize, or deflect.
Or maybe you lean into blame, you get defensive, or try to take control, or even avoid. So this week, we want you to get really honest and be open about what you might be experiencing emotionally in those tough moments and how you tend to react. Really take notice of that. You might decide to take some time to sit and journal about reactions that you've had over the past few months that may not have been how you really wanted to react. Or you might notice how you react this week or how you're tempted to react this week if you run into a pushback predicament with one of the kids.
Yeah. And if you've got the courage to go even deeper, you might spend some time thinking about how your kids or stepkids tend to react to your reaction. Do they get angry and push back even louder? Do they shut down and isolate themselves? How does all of this affect your relationship? Identify your typical response to pushback and your child's reaction.
That's right. So spend some time with that this week and then join us next week to discover what you can do when faced with pushback predicaments to help your kids and your stepkids move through their pain and confusion.
Absolutely. Don't miss it.
That's right. We can't wait to meet you back here next week. But for now, this episode is going to be a wrap.
Until next time.